Good morning again, ninth grade. This is the next video in the series. We're going to go from ancient Greece and we're going to keep moving forward in time as if we're following the shift of power, if you like, from one empire to the next. From the Greek Empire, we will move over to the Roman Empire. So we're going to start today looking at Rome, and we're going to look at the Roman architecture first. Slides on their way. Here is a map to show you where we have been already. India is a bit further, the Indus Valley further over here, Mesopotamia over here, Egypt, Crete, Greece, Athens here, and now we're moving further west to look at the art of the Roman Empire. Here is Rome. It says here Italy, but I want you to know that in those days, in the days of the Roman Empire, there was no such thing as Italy. Italy as a modern country was created much, much later. So the whole Roman Empire was centered on the city of Rome. And you can see this map shows in red how far the Roman Empire extended all the way up to the north of England, Spain, northern Africa, through Egypt, Middle East, all the way through what's now Turkey, Greece, and France. Just so you know where we are, so when we look at the artwork, which is in Rome, we're here halfway down the Italian peninsula. Now, the Romans were great collectors and copiers. They actually loved Greek culture and they followed Greek culture in many ways. But when we see a Roman temple built, I want to say, in the Greek style, then we can see that it's really missing something of the sensitivity that the Greeks had. For a Greek person, these columns would be way too long and thin, and the whole temple would be too narrow, out of proportion. It wouldn't have that fine sensitivity that we find in the Greek architecture. So as we move forward in time and go through different cultures, we see different strengths, and then we also see, if I can put it this way, certain weaknesses. The Romans didn't have this fine visual sense that the Greeks had. You can see that in their architecture, and you can see it in their sculpture as well. But the Romans were developing something else. And to really understand what the Romans brought, were capable of bringing, what they brought into the world, we have to look at the arch. So here you see a bridge in the south of France is still standing, still functioning today, has been standing up there for 2020 years or so. And the whole thing is based on the arch. You can see at the bottom, large, massive arches, and then slightly smaller arches and even smaller arches. So the whole design of this bridge is endless repetition of arches. The arch is their invention and their architectural motif, and also the representation of a whole new way of thinking, that the Romans could understand the kind of engineering that makes an arch function. When you see a building with pillars, the pillars are working absolutely vertically. This is not a pillar. Let's go back. So a pillar works in such a way that it's completely vertical. It has to be absolutely vertical. There's weight above and it's pressing straight down. The pillar carries it and carries that weight down into the ground. There can only be a certain distance between pillars. If this gets too wide, then this stone here will crack and fall down. So the type of engineering is called static engineering. It's forces pressing straight down, and they press down through the stone of the pillar into the ground. And the limitation of this kind of engineering is that there has to be lots and lots of pillars and not much space in between. You come to the arch. The arch is called, it's an engineering which is active forces. So in a certain way, all of these stones here are falling. They want to fall. But these ones here are also falling, and then they meet here and they lock together at the keystone. So the forces pressing down are transferred around this curve. And the forces pressing down would like to bulge out this way, but there's also equal amount of forces pressing from this one this way, so that they become balanced. The forces become balanced out. So the Romans, when they come to do architectural things, also use the arch as a visual, symbolic shape. So this is called, what do they call this? A victorious arch. When they've won a battle, then they build a monument to the whole battle they've been in. The scenes from the war and different important scenes. But what I'm saying is that they're using these arches now as something symbolic, not just pure engineering, but also as symbolic. In the background, you can see the very famous building, the Colosseum. We'll look at that here. The Colosseum is built up of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these arches. And on this building, you can see this slide. You can see underneath is concrete. So the Romans also invented and developed the use of concrete. And then concrete, as you can see here, is a little bit ugly. It's not very attractive. So they would build in concrete, and then they would face the building. They would put a layer of stone, which is a kind of a decoration. See here, the concrete, the stone. They would put that on as a kind of a decoration. So this is also something new that hasn't been done in other cultures. That when you see them, the architecture is made out of one material. It's stone, and that's it. It's stone through and through. But the Romans invented something which was very practical, very functional, but it also happened to be ugly, this concrete. And they wanted it to look nice. So then they would put a facade on. And the facade here includes pillars, architraves, stonework, the corbels, the decorations up here. So that was a feature of their architecture, that they had to build it with something quite strong and functional, but not very attractive, and then they would put a facade on the top. This is inside the Colosseum. Of course, now it's a ruin. No doubt you've seen images of this recreated in movies with all the thousands of people sitting in the seats. So the Romans were also incredible engineers in many ways. Part of their building of this empire was because of their engineering skills. They could travel all over the Roman Empire, building roads, building bridges, building towns, building amphitheaters, and other versions of like this Colosseum for their games. Now, when we come to look for a real, genuine invention of the Romans in terms of architecture, then we come to this building, which is called the Pantheon. Pantheon, Pantheon. It means, pan means all, so it's a temple for all the gods. This is also a completely new idea. Every temple that you will find in ancient times was dedicated to one god. It was made for one god to come into that temple. And then, of course, there were many temples, each one for a different god. The Romans, in building this building, for the first time in history, created a building in which any god could come into it, and a person could go in there and pray to make an offering to any god of their choice. This is the view from the front, and you can see the pillars and the stonework, a traditional style. You may recognize something a little different from the Greek, just in the way that they do the forms and the proportions. And if I was to show you some slides, which I may do tomorrow, of an earlier culture from this part of the world, the Etruscan culture, then you would see there's some similarity in this front of the temple to the Etruscan architecture. This part at the front is beautiful marble, and the part at the back, which you can see is round, is concrete. So again, this beautiful stonework, but the functional part is a bit ugly, strong, tough concrete. This shows you the view from above. There's the entrance, and that leads you in to this round building. So in the history of architecture, this is also the first round and domed building. If you think of what a dome is, you can see with these lines here in the concrete, a dome is made up of lots and lots of arches. So if you imagine an arch going across, and then you rotated it or added lots and lots of arches, 360 degrees, you would create a dome. So this part, as I said, just to remind you, is beautiful marble, very attractive. This part, the round building, and also the roof itself, is made out of concrete. Now you're probably already looking at this. What's this? This roof's got a hole in it, and that is deliberate. That's left there. It's called an oculus, like an eye, and it's to let the light in. I'll show you why when we go inside. Here's the view from ground level, and you can see it's very large and magnificent. And you enter in through here. And as you go through the doorway here, you will see, you go through, this entranceway is more square, more traditional, with the pillars and the triangular pediment above. And then you start to go in, you start to see things that are curved. And then you come into this world on the inside made up. It's completely round. And then the ceiling is domed. And here is the oculus letting the light in. I'll show you some artist's impressions, because you can never get a photograph that shows the whole experience. But you can see these different levels. There are little alcoves at the bottom here with sculptures in. These are more modern sculptures or Renaissance sculptures. In the past, they would have had Roman gods in them. There's a more significant niche here, which now has, you can see the mosaics of a Christian church. That's also added much later. And up here you can see these niches which go around. There's one there, one there, one there. And in these niches would have been statues of many, many different gods. The Romans went around, and in a certain way I can say this, they went around building their empire. They also went around collecting gods, and they would add new gods to their pantheon. As they went into Gaul and they met some new religion from Gaul, or they went to England and they found a new god, then they would include them, they would bring them into their culture. And they went to Persia, they found the god Mithras, and this Mithras became a very important god for the Roman soldiers. This ceiling, you can see they've put these recessed square recesses in here, and there's a reason for this. By doing that, they make the ceiling a little lighter, a bit thinner and lighter, and the concrete in between here makes kind of ribs, which carries the strength which provides the strength of the dome of the roof. Here's a photo. It's not, the color it's a bit over enlarged to give an impression of the light coming in, shining on the floor. When you go into this building, and in the history of architecture and the history of temples, this is the first building that ever had so much open space. So the fact that they were able to build this gigantic dome means that inside here there are no pillars blocking up the space. They managed to create this huge open space. So if you were living at that time, you would never have entered into such a huge open space contained inside a building before. And that's a great achievement of the Roman engineers and architects, to create this open space that the people can come inside. This is such an important idea. It's a huge transformation. All temples in the past, all the cultures we looked at, the temples were only for special people, the priests. The pharaoh would go in. In Greece, the temples were the house of the god, and even the priest would be outside the temple looking in, and the altar would be outside the temple. So the Romans are the people who created a building in which anyone could go in. Anyone could go in, and they had the freedom to choose. Today I'm going to go and pray to this god. I'm making this up. For example, I'm going to pray to the god of healing because my grandmother's sick. The next day I come in, I pray to the god of wisdom over here because we have to make some decision. And likewise, all of these gods, all of these niches held different gods. And it was a person's choice then to enter into the temple and choose which god to go and pray to. So the incredible idea, maybe you don't connect that with the Roman people, this idea of freedom of choice, but there's something, we think of the Romans being much more connected with their warlike aspect and their engineering, their road building, but there was also something different when we see that in this temple. They had this idea of personal choice when it came to religion. Now this oculus lets the light in and it shines down, and when the sun is directly above, then it shines right here on this place in the center. And if you stand here in the center, which you can do, anyone can do that, then you are in the middle, and all the gods are around the outside. Every other temple before this, every other religious building, it was always a god in the middle and the people on the outside. Especially when you look at the Greek temples, it's really clear. The temple is placed carefully in the landscape. The god is in there, and all the people are around in the landscape, in the city, or on the sea, or in the countryside, looking from the outside, and the god is in the middle. And this is turned inside out. So the person is in the middle, God's on the outside. So the oculus functions in a very particular way, and this is a painting from the 1700s. To give you an idea about that, the sun is, of course, always rotating. It's always going across the heavens, across the sky. So when it moves across the sky, it sends its light beam in, and this beam of light will then move according to the time of day and to the time of year. Now it's shining here. As the sun comes up higher, you can imagine it will shine down here on this god. And then as the sun goes across the sky, it will rotate, it will come around, then next it will shine on this one and then that one. So the oculus lets the light in to shine on every single god at different times. So in a way, the Romans are saying every god has its moment when the sun shines on it. in a certain way, the Romans are saying the gods are all equal. There's a whole pantheon of gods, and they're all equal in the way they're represented in this building. Perhaps you could say the ones down here are larger, they're closer to people. Maybe they're more important ones, and the ones up here are a little bit more remote. But still, this idea that the sun shines on every god has its moment of shining in the sunlight. These last two slides just give you an impression of this beautiful architecture that is working between the geometrical forms and the sunlight shining in and creating these beautiful shadows. And then this one, a more recent photo, just with the sun coming in, shining on these ones up here in the ceiling. A beautiful, clean, clear architecture. When this was new, when the Romans had just built it, all this interior stonework was covered in bronze. So it must have been incredible, strong, gleaming, really reflecting the sunlight. Would have been a very strong impression. This is the last slide I want to show you of this building. And it shows you a cross-section of the building so that you understand that inside this building, the way that it's designed, a perfect sphere fits inside, obviously with the dome, but the way that it's proportioned, it also just touches the floor here. So when you walk in this building, you enter the building, you come in and you stand in the center, like where this sculpture is here, then your feet are resting on the outside of this circle. And you stand within this perfect sphere, because it's not just a circle, it's a dome. It's actually a sphere inside here. So that's a very powerful place. If you walk in and you go and stand right in the center, you stand in a very important place where this dome touches the floor, and you stand there, and in a certain way it's as if you are included in this whole pantheon of gods. Okay, so here's the things I'd like you to do out of that slide presentation. Make a couple of sketches. If you would sketch the aqueduct, you may remember that if you were in the 6th grade in a Waldorf school, drawing one of those aqueducts. Do a quick sketch of it and a little bit of explanation of how the engineering works, just as I described it. So a few notes about this active forces pressing down around the arch and the keystone. A quick sketch also of the triumphal arch. That was the word I was trying to remember, triumphal arch. That's the arches they would make when they came back from a campaign, having had a successful campaign against the Gauls or the Africans, and then they come back and they have a big parade and a celebration, and they make a triumphal arch. That's the archway I showed you with the 3 doorways, the arches going through it. So just quick sketches of those, so you have those in your main lesson book. And then I'd like you to choose one of the views that you like of the Pantheon. There's a few choices. From the outside view, you can see the front, the porch, and you can also see the barrel, the rounded part of the building at the back. Spend a little bit longer on that to make a nice drawing of that. The Pantheon is the architecture of the Roman people. There are many temples that look like classical Greek temples, but really the thing that the Romans invented, and the important thing, is this Pantheon, this type of building, the round building where the people can get inside, all of the people, and even a person can stand right in the middle, in the place of power. They can stand right in the middle there. And then the last thing I would ask you to do this time out of this slide presentation is a little bit more creative writing. I would like you to imagine that you enter that Pantheon and you stand there in that position, right in the center where your feet are resting on the dome, which is the same dome that is holding all of those gods, so that you are also included in that sphere of the gods. As I say, it's a kind of an egotistical gesture that the Romans made in a certain respect, um, but that was part of their belief, the importance that they also placed, and the strength that they also held. So a little bit of creative writing there, please. Try to just capture that in your imagination, what that would feel like. You're standing there, either the light is shining down on you, you're in the center, or you're standing there and the light is shining into one of the niches with one of the gods in it. Great, thank you.